Welcome to the Untold Story podcast. I'm Martha MacCallum, and this is an untold story that needs to be told in a much larger way. So I'm very glad to sort of at least give the tip of the iceberg today for a few moments in talking with Burke Bryant, who is the president of HARP Rescue Mission, and HARP stands for Humanitarian Aid and Rescue Project. I think, Burke, it's probably best if I let you tell everybody what you're doing, because you're involved in Ukraine, in Mexico at our southern border, trying to rescue people and save them. Give everybody a sense of what you're working on.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We worked out of Ukraine for about 4 months doing extractions or rescuing, I guess we'll use that word, rescuing people out of some of the frontline territories over there. We moved out of Ukraine after 4 months because we ended up in a city. We had to hike in about 1.5 miles, and then we got hit with phosphorus, biological weapon, which put us in the hospital for a bit, and that's what got us back into the United States. I guess at that point, we're in a recovery mode, and one of the things we dealt with there quite a bit was the trafficking of women and children. So when we got back into the United States, we decided to form a second division of HARP called Halo Group, and then Halo Group's primary function now is countering the trafficking of women and children domestically and internationally.
Okay, and let me just jump in, because I want to just give people a sense of your background, military and otherwise. And I just also want to say, we'll talk a little bit about Ukraine, and then I also want to talk to you about what's going on in the border. But just give us a sense of where you're coming from, what your past is.
Past, I was Navy, actually. Nothing really special. I was an operations specialist in the Navy. When I got out of the Navy, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and became a fashion photographer, believe it or not, and then moved from that into war photography. And then, like so many others, I kind of put the camera down one day and decided to do something a little bit more with my life. I felt like, based upon my experience and what I've been trained in and the things like that, I could do a lot more for people. And that's kind of how I got into this business.
Wow. So the story that you tell about what's going on in Ukraine, because I think a lot of us look at, we hear about trafficking, we see pictures of children. Most recently, we're seeing these horrific images that are coming out of Turkey and Syria, and front page stories of children who lost their parents under the rubble. I read a heartbreaking story in the Washington Post yesterday about a child who they were trying to pull out of the rubble, who wanted to go back in because his family was under the building. It's heartbreaking. It's like you can't even wrap your arms around all the things that you want to be aware of that are going on in the world. But you choose to put yourself right in the middle of some of these agonizing situations. Give us a sense. You extracted 168 people from Ukraine. I'm assuming they were of all ages, but you also focused on trying to help kids who were in orphanages close to the front lines there. What is the situation there?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, it's hard to say. We do our best in those situations to kind of remove every emotion we feel we have, just to be able to go in and get the job done without kind of cracking at any point. The children were rough for us, because one of the biggest disadvantages we had was that the orphanages in Ukraine supersede government power when it comes to the kids. So they have the ultimate say in where the kids go and what happens to those kids. So consequently, there's a slight bit of corruption that takes place there that we became aware of, where they don't want to let the kids go, regardless of the situation, the danger at hand. They don't want to let the kids go because the kids are a paycheck. They get paid based upon each child that's in that orphanage. So when they lose a child, they lose that amount of money. So they want to take the children with them everywhere they go. The problem then becomes that area, while the children are there, gets occupied. It gets taken over by Russian forces in this case, this example I'm giving you. Well, when that happens, all the paperwork of those children is then lost. So now we have displaced children that have no paperwork at all. So the Russians, in this case, will take the children, they'll immediately retina scan them, and then they'll develop the paperwork for the children. So now they're creating this new paperwork for these children. So you can kind of see the problem there is that, you know, the children lose their parents, or even if the parents are there, the parents get separated from the children. And now you just have undocumented children running around everywhere. And then where they go from there is the big question, thus the trafficking and people making money off the children.
Yeah, you said that these children, there's photos of them in books, and they're basically sold from anywhere between $300 and $2,000 a child.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm glad you brought that up. The books are extremely disturbing because the books really gave us a view of how much of a business it is, whereas I think what the normal person would think of as an adoption from an orphanage is like, there's a child that needs something and we're going to provide that something to the child regardless of the size of the child, the color of the hair color, the weight of the child, etc. Over there, what we came across were the record books where people were actually ordering and on wait for children that had specific eye color, specific hair color, the potential height and things like that. And it wasn't staying within country. A lot of that stuff we could see, within the books, it would show where some of these children would go into Romania, Moldova, Russia itself, different parts. So they were moving around all over the country. And again, like, you lose the paperwork or the paperwork is intentionally lost. I don't know how it works, but I can tell you that the system over there is extremely flawed. And then the question I have to ask myself, is it intentionally flawed or is it accidentally flawed?
One more question on that. So when American organizations are trying to help children who are orphans in Ukraine in the middle of the war, and I would imagine we're going to see some of this desire in Turkey and Syria as well, are those organizations handling it better? Are they more trustworthy? One would hope. What did you see?
Well, when we were in Ukraine, we were only one of two organizations that were cleared by Child Protective Services. Every orphanage that we went to and every child rescue that we did was a request based upon CPS. So it went through CPS, the proper channel process, to us, and then we would do the recovery, and then we'd send the information back to show that that child or those children were recovered or that they weren't. So the paperwork stayed in line. The problem is, I think nowadays, or in this situation, we'll just say, is that people aren't aware of the long-term effects of what they do. So there are people over there like, we're going to rescue everybody. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman or a child, and that's fine. But then they get these children. Well, they pull the children from the orphanages, or they take the child from a city that's, getting bombed or something like that. Once they have the child in their possession, they don't know where to take the child. Or some of them do know where to take the child. They'll take it to a church or a hospital or maybe another place that claims that they're going to be helping the children. Now you again still have displaced children because the children are now exposed to anyone taking. It doesn't matter whether it's Ukrainian or Russian or otherwise, but now you have a child that someone can walk in and take and then pull away. So I don't think they understand the long-term effects of actually like the process of how it should work. So again, it's like, congratulations, you rescued 5 kids, but you dropped them off over here and now they're missing again. Where'd they go and who took them? That's the problem.
Chaotic. It's just so much chaos and terrifying for these kids. I also want to ask you about the work that you're doing on the southern border, because you said that you were hospitalized in the middle of your rescue efforts, getting hit with phosphorus rounds from Russia into Ukraine.
Mm-hmm, correct.
So that's scary. You're doing okay after that?
Yeah, I think my lungs have recovered the best they will. I feel 100% again. I just don't know what the long-term side effects of that's going to be, if any. I hope there's no long-term side effects. But
we hope so, too. So then you came home to the United States and found another enormous need, which is the overwhelming amount of human trafficking that comes through tunnels from Mexico. And you also have a disturbing detail in here that I want to ask you about with regard to that. But give everyone a sense of what you've learned about how many children, women are being trafficked through this process, and what is their situation? Give us some examples of what kind of situations you're seeing.
Sure. I think when people think of the tunnel systems, they automatically think of drugs moving back and forth. And then I think it kind of stops there, as it did with me. Like, for the longest time, I was like, okay, the cartels are using tunnels to move drugs. Like, that's no big surprise. And then my mind kind of ended it there. Once we really started looking into it, what we were finding was these tunnels are being used for everything, including trafficking. And not only moving men, women, children, boys, etc., through those tunnels into North America, but also from North America back into Mexico. So again, that was another side of it that we were completely unaware of in the very beginning. Was, again, like, I guess we're kind of pre-programmed to believe it's drugs and it's always coming into the United States. But what we found out is it also goes from the United States back into Mexico. And these are abductions.